How about that? All right. Good morning, everybody. Keep eating, please. Welcome to the Alumni Board Advent Mass and Brunch meeting. Special welcome to our special guests, our family members who are here today, especially our spouses. Thank you for your support of your husband's work and dedication for SLUH. I know many of you also have not only a husband, but a son and grandson, or maybe I don't think there's any great-grandsons who go here or win here. And so thank you for your support of SLUH in that respect also. First, we always like to welcome new board members. Are there any new board members here? And if there are, will you stand up? Yes, sir. Introduce yourself. Pete? Anyone else? Yes. Larry Costello, 73. All right, well, welcome, and thank you for your dedication. Couple of notes, or one note. One of our alumni board members, Glenn Kemper from the class of 82, is recovering from a kidney transplant on Tuesday, and he's doing well. He appreciates all of your prayers and support. As you all know, the fall season is our primary fundraising and phone-a-thon season. We had a great year, or we're having a great year, it's not over. Of the 51 classes between 1960 and 2011, 41 conducted a phone-a-thon, our other organized effort to lead their class to higher participation. 104 volunteers gave an evening of their time here at SLUH for phone-a-thons. Unknown number of others made outreach efforts from their homes. One of our younger members even flew home a week early from San Francisco for his Thanksgiving break to participate in his class phone-a-thon. So thank you to everybody who did phone-a-thons. It's a key responsibility of the board members, so thank you for those efforts. We received gifts and pledges from close to 1,600 alumni so far this year, slightly ahead of last year's pace. And recall that in August we talked about our goal being 30% participation for all classes for the year, up from 28% last year. We're almost halfway there with 14% participation so far, so we're doing well. Year-end giving in December plays a key role, and maybe even particularly this year because there's so much uncertainty about what the tax law might hold next year. So hoping for a big end-of-year rate of contributions and donations. But by our February meeting, we should have a much better idea if we're on track to hit that target. And you know, during the fall, alumni have connected with and supported with SLUH in so many different ways. 850 alumni attended reunions in the fall, which is pretty remarkable. Thanks to all those that led that effort. I don't know if you heard about Joe Castellano's book, Bull in the Ring. He had a bull session here at school. Over 100 alumni participated in that, and there were 200 overall, more than 200 overall that attended that. Scholarship Golf Classic, some of you may have played in that. Strong alumni participation, both as players and sponsors. Planning for bicentennial. This is such a special year at SLUH. We're going into 2018. It's pretty remarkable when you think. On the way down here, I heard a radio ad for St. Louis University, and they were touting their, the 200-year anniversary. And it really is remarkable when you're going to school here in the 50s or 60s or 70s or 80s. 2018 seemed a long way away, but it's here. It's here, and it's going to be a big year for the school. Thanks also for everybody who served as a trustee on the big board or on one of the advisory committees. There was an alumni art exhibit on campus in the fall. I think that just closed. The archive group from the class of 1963, all of your efforts, thank you very much. Looking forward to seeing that. And then just supportive athletic teams. And then also some of you here and other alumni have volunteered at the school, whether it be in mock trial or robotics, the rifle team, and the list goes on. So thank you all for leading the charge in alumni support. Now, we're going to move to our guest speaker. If you're at Mass this morning, you've already met our guest speaker, Father Joseph Hill. At Mass this morning, Father Hill talked about, I felt like he had been wandering to get here, and he was in exile. And so I'm going to say a little bit about that. He was born in Phoenix, but moved to England at age 9. Attended high school at Stonyhurst, a Jesuit boarding school in England, where he played rugby and began to discern his vocation for the priesthood. Went to Oxford, where he earned a bachelor's degree in theology, and moved back to the United States and entered the Society of Jesus at age 22. Earned a master's degree in philosophy at Fordham while coaching Fordham's rugby team. Next, spent 3 years as a Jesuit scholastic teaching at Jesuit High School in New Orleans and coaching the rugby team. Then moved to Brazil to do his theology studies. Did an intensive study of the Portuguese language. Then enrolled in the Jesuit School of Philosophy and Theology in Brazil, where studying in Portuguese, mind you, he completed a master's degree in theology. Next, he moved to Boston. No mention of rugby in Boston, but where he completed his theological studies at Boston College. And after being ordained last year, he was assigned to a Jesuit parish in San Juan, Puerto Rico. I may have my years wrong on last year, but where he did pastoral work for a year. And now he has landed at SLUH High. He teaches theology and is part of the school's administrative team as the head of campus ministry. Please welcome the impressive Father Joseph Hill.
It's very strange being introduced. I should probably invite Mr. Conroy to come to my class every day and introduce me in this way. Maybe the students would pay better attention. No, but I'm happy to be here. I don't normally speak with groups such as this, so this is a bit of a new experience for me. Today I thought I'd talk a little bit about what is the future of Jesuit education. This is something that I suppose I'm dedicating the rest of my life to. I've thought a lot about, and I want to share some reflections about where I see we need to be going and where St. Louis University High is going right now. So it's going to be basically in 3 parts. I'm going to talk about where Jesuit education was, where we came from, and then what are the challenges and opportunities we face right now, and then where should we be going in the future, and what is SLUH High doing to get there. So, what was Jesuit education? Many definitions, but I took this quote from the Ratio Studiorum. This was the first program for the Jesuit schools. It was published in 1599. The Jesuits spent about 30 years developing it, and it became the standard manual for running a Jesuit school for about 200 years. And so this is what they say right at the beginning. Since one of the leading ministries of our society, the schools, is teaching our neighbors all the disciplines in keeping with our institute in such a way that they are thereby aroused to a knowledge and love of our Maker and Redeemer. The first Jesuits understood the ministry of education as a way in which to help people to God. Every single document says that. The constitutions say that. And they think of the disciplines, that is, all the teaching, all the subjects, as a means to that, as somehow a way to get people to, as it says here, knowledge and love of God. There was sort of an integration that God is the integrating principle of all the disciplines, all knowledge. That's how they understood it. That all knowledge about the world ultimately finds its foundation and cause in God. So everything should be related back up to God in our understanding of the world. And then in our action, because we are also created by God for a particular end, everything that we do, all the talents that we have and how we use them should be ordered back to God out of love. So that's why it says here, to a knowledge and love, not just knowledge, but also a love and action. So God is the integrating principle of everything that Jesuit schools are to do, both in the classroom and in every other activity. And we use the phrase ad maiorem Dei gloriam, for the greater glory of God, to kind of capture that. Greater glory of God in all our academic work, greater glory of God in all our actions and activities in the school. So how does that get sort of brought out in the actual practice of the schools? So I'm going to say a few stories from my own experience. I went to a Jesuit school. This is the photo of the drive coming into the school, Stonyhurst College. It was actually founded in France in 1593. During the time of the Reformation, Catholicism was outlawed in England. And so Catholic families who stayed faithful had to send their sons to France to get a Catholic education. So the Jesuits founded a school in Saint-Omer in France. And long story, I can't get into all the details, but it had to move several times because the Jesuits were kicked out of France in 1759. So it had to move to Belgium. And then during the time of the French Revolution, obviously there was wars and persecution of the church. So they moved to England clandestinely in 1794 to the location there it is now, and it's been there for over 200 years. So before I actually got to Stonyhurst, they celebrated their Quattrocentennial. So it's a school that has a continuous tradition from the earliest years of the society. And these are some of the things that I experienced that incarnated this vision of God at the heart of everything. The first is the eruditio et pietas. The early Jesuits were known for being very learned, very knowledgeable, because they were trained at the best university in the world, the University of Paris. But they were also very holy men. And it was this combination that was unique, I think, at that time. There were a lot of religious orders that were holy, monasteries and other religious groups that didn't have the eruditio, the intellectual knowledge of the latest of what was going on in the universities. But the Jesuits were able to combine both those things. And there was a Jesuit at Stonyhurst when I was there, Father Chaim, who was also a rugby coach, by the way. He did not coach when I was there, but he was before my time. He was retired, and he was a very holy man. We used to often see him sort of sneaking into the chapels or sneaking out of the chapels. He didn't teach any classes. He was in his mid-80s, but he would still come to rugby games, and he would write the match reports for the varsity team. He would go to the rugby games, write the match reports, and he would put the match reports up on the bulletin board in the school. And when I was on varsity, we used to wait with anticipation for what he would say, because they were beautifully written. They showed a great capacity of language, and so we enjoyed. It was like exciting to listen to it. And he would draw out different things, and we would see him in the hallways, and we would talk to him, and he would give us, little pointers, little advice. But he was a man who embodied this eruditio et pietas. We loved his writing, but we were drawn to him because he was holy. And that combination is really one of the key things that I think Jesuit education tries to instill in its students. There's another principle, non multa sed multum. Not many things, but much. That is going deep. There's so much knowledge out there. There's so much that you can learn. Encyclopedias, libraries, full of information. But the Jesuits focus not so much on reading hundreds and hundreds of books, but on getting the students to understand at a profound level the principles and causes of the different areas of knowledge. And I had a physics teacher, Mr. Scarisbrick, who I think embodied this principle. He was a little bit eccentric, I would say, which is not unusual for Jesuit schools. But he was a brilliant teacher, and he would basically set up a problem of some sort of physics problem, and he wouldn't tell us the answer. He would just put it in front of us, and it was like a trick. He would try to trick us. So at the beginning, obviously, we'd fall into the trap, and we would come to the obvious conclusion on what was the cause of this particular physical attribute. And then he would be like, haha, but you got it wrong. And then he would sort of show us why it was wrong. And this sort of counterintuitive principles that we see in a lot of physical phenomena. But then, of course, we quickly cotton on to these tricks of his. And so he would come in with we'd come in with another problem, and we would like be very passive, like, no, we're not going to play this game. We're not going to be shown to be fools over and over again. But then he said, so how are you going to get there then? How are you going to get to the right answer? And we started to learn, I guess, like the scientific method in an inductive process, where he got us to sort of see from the inside how we get to an understanding of the causes of physical phenomena. And I remember going in England, you have national exams at age 16 and then at 18. And I remember going into the national exam at 16, the physics exam, and this thing was so easy to us. I mean, it was ridiculous. I was like joking around with it. It was insulting to our intelligence because we just understood so well the principles and causes that he had taught us. I think that is really, when we talk about the eruditio, it's not about a lot of knowledge. It's not about how many books you read. It's about how you understand the books that you read, how you understand the principles, the underlying big ideas that govern all of the knowledge. The third principle, this is also taken from the Ratio Studiorum, is a very famous goal of one of the courses, the course of rhetoric. It's called Eloquentia Perfecta. In fact, the whole first stage of the old Jesuit formation was in order to become a master of language. Each course actually had a sort of an exit exam where you had to perform something. So if you were in grammar, which was the lowest level, you had to show that you were a master of grammatical rules, grammatical use. If you were passing out of poetry, you had to write your own poetry and show that you could use the forms that make good poetry. And then for rhetoric, you had to write your own oration and give it. This is all in Latin, by the way. So delivering your own oration in Latin. But at Stonyhurst, we didn't have to deliver our own orations in Latin, but there were a lot of things that we did that were just built into the curriculum in order to get us to become excellent at the use of language. So when we were in 8th grade, because it was 8th plus 9 through 12, every homeroom had to put on a play. They were called the LG mini dramas. It was a competition. And so every student had to be part of a play and perform on stage. There was also a poetry competition between the homerooms in LG. So they would choose a theme. I remember my homeroom chose Blake, and we performed a series of Blake poems. And there was a judge, and actually we won that one. We didn't win the mini dramas, but we won the poetry competition. So there were a lot of things like that. There was a debating society, and it was a boarding school, so there's just not that much to do at a boarding school. And this was before internet, so it got pretty boring sometimes. So things like the debate were highly anticipated, and the upperclassmen would choose a topic, and then this was like a very dramatic thing, and there'd be back and forth, and even sometimes teachers would get involved. I remember one time there was a teacher, an English teacher, Mr. Dunn, and I think the thesis was, this house is proud to be a member of the British Empire, proud of the legacy of the British Empire. So there were all these people criticizing all the atrocities that the British did during the imperial regime. And then this teacher got up and said, "How dare these men saying to profane the name of the great British Empire that brought civilization to the world?" And all the students were like, yeah. But it taught us a lot about how to speak publicly, how to use language in order to communicate, which is a very high-level skill, as you know. And then the last principle, ac virtutem, the school of virtue. Many times in the Ratio Studiorum, it talks about forming the students in virtue. That is, it's not just about them becoming knowledgeable. It's about them becoming good, becoming holy. And this is what pleases God. That's what it often goes on about. And St. Ignatius talks about that as well. So founding the students in solid virtue. And that's what the structures are, the discipline is about. and the way of proceeding, the way that we do things, so that students become virtuous. So that was a little bit of my experience of Jesuit education. Maybe a lot of these things resonate with you from your time at SLUH High. That's what it was. But today we face many challenges that attack and I think undermine the maintenance of these ideas or this way of proceeding. So I'm just going to mention 4 very quickly. We could spend a lot of time on the challenges, but the 4 are the drift in education in the US, which I'll talk about in a second, the decline of Catholic culture, the effect of technology and the internet on human life. It's a huge issue. And then on sort of the more development side, Melissa could speak more about this, the rising cost of schooling and the growing inability of families to pay for it. There's a huge pressure right now in Catholic education on how we're going to maintain it in light of rising costs and not rising income for middle-class families. So I'm not going to talk about the last 2 because that's not really my area as much. I'm just going to talk about the first 2. The trends in American education. These are some of the trends. These are not all of them. But there's been this huge push over the last 30 years, but actually throughout this entire century, privileging knowledge over understanding. What does that mean? Covering content, covering information, having the students memorize and know facts, know information about texts and history, and even, words and concepts in science and these sorts of things, but without the requisite understanding. So this is sort of embodied in a lot of standardized tests, which are very important, in fact, for, let's say, college applications, for example, and other such measures that the students have to deal with. So it's interesting because in this model, students become very good at schooling, at playing the game, and our students especially get excellent at this, at sort of figuring out what they need to do in order to be successful at this test or with this teacher. But they lack the genuine understanding of the subject. I'll give you an example. This is not of a SLUH High student, but one of my friends, another Jesuit, he's doing a PhD right now in economics, and they were doing a group project. So this is a PhD student, okay? They were doing a group project analyzing macroeconomic trends on the basis of taxes or something like that. And they were crunching the numbers, and they came out with the conclusion of what this company, this sort of hypothetical company, should do in order to maximize their profit in light of this tax structure. And when they came to present, one of the other doctoral students in this guy's group was asked as they presented. She was from Korea. She actually wasn't American, but asked, so why did you come to this conclusion? And she said, well, because when you put these numbers together in the formula, this is what comes out. This is the number that comes out. And the professor was like, well, but what does that mean? And she said, no, this is what the math, this is what it shows. What she could not do is translate the numbers into the real world, what it actually meant in the real world. She could crunch the numbers, she was very good at that, but she didn't understand what the numbers meant. That happens so often these days. Students can manipulate the formula and play the game of schooling, but they don't actually understand what it means and how it applies in the real world. And this is a huge problem. And this is not something this is something many people are talking about, many people in the world of education. The second major trend which is affecting us here at SLUH is the privileging or the emphasis on STEM education over the humanities. For those who don't know, STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. So the privileging of the hard sciences, if you will, and their application in engineering to the more classical education of humanities. Now, Jesuit education certainly had math and also science as part of it from the very early days, which was very innovative at that time. But it definitely privileged the humanities, language, the classics, rhetoric, poetry, these sorts of things. But now, pretty much every school, if you go to Burroughs or you go to MICDS or you go to Priory or these other schools, maker spaces, robotics programs, science labs, these are the things, these are the shiny things that are being put forward as the future of their education. And we too are influenced by that. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just something that is moving away from what was at the heart of our tradition, which is the humanistic education. There's a decline in language skill. We see this across the board, not just in Jesuit schools, in language skill and communication. And the technology influences this as well, but the ability of students to articulate their ideas, both verbally and on paper, is diminishing slowly over time. And because of text messaging and these sorts of things, they become very good at pithy, short, abbreviated phrases, but clear and precise articulation is something that they struggle with. And if you talk to any English teacher, they will go on and on about this problem. Yeah, the kind of the appreciation for beauty, this is also something that technology is influencing a lot, but students don't even sort of see it anymore. And they're not given the opportunity to see it. And everything is functional, everything is utilitarian for the sake of its use, the most efficient. And the ornamental, the beautiful, which is something that Jesuit education certainly privileged. If you go to Europe, to any of the Jesuit colleges, these were very, very beautiful buildings. And there was art around everywhere. At Stonyhurst, there was art all in the hallways. The chapels were magnificent. The privileging of beauty over utility. But we've shifted very much away from that today. And then there's a huge problem of intellectual fragmentation. This is a problem in the universities as well. Every discipline has a sub-discipline and a sub-sub-discipline, and people just hyper-specialize, and therefore no one really has this vision of the whole. And so even in between disciplines, it's hard for people to speak to each other. And every discipline has its own set of journals, and everyone just reads those journals and doesn't read the journals from other areas. So there's this big actual shift to more interdisciplinary learning. And because a lot of problems, obviously, are not focused just on one area, but combine many. And STEM is actually an attempt to try to put the sciences and technology and math back together a little bit. But see, these are some of the trends that we're seeing. All right, somewhat quickly. This should not be news to anyone here, but there has been a decline, pretty steady decline in Catholic culture, practice, and belief over the last 50 years. These are some stats from CARA, the center at Georgetown that looks at, this is what it looks at, Catholic practice and beliefs. So this is mass attendance. So these graphs are those who grew up before Vatican II, those who grew up in and around Vatican II, those who grew up after Vatican II, and then the millennials. So the second generation after Vatican II. And what we see is a decline in attendance at Mass, a decline in their desire, if you want to put it that way, to be Catholic, and then a decline in their beliefs about fundamental things. So that third graph is, does not doubt that God is creator. There are many other metrics I could have put up there, but it's interesting that each generation, it falls off somewhat. So that the millennials, it's only 64%. Do not doubt that God is the creator. So that's one metric. So this affects us, SLUH High. That we have more stats than this, but this is just a snapshot. This is the freshman class of 2016, 2017. This is their mass attendance. So only 25% of SLUH High students go to Mass every Sunday. And then you have another 18% go almost every Sunday, and then about another 13% go monthly. But we have about 45% of students who only go on special occasions or never go. This is a Catholic school now. So that's a pretty interesting statistic. We don't have longitudinal data about what it was like here 40 years ago or 50 years ago. But we see that as a major challenge for us. And then when it comes to understanding this, that's the practice. In the understanding of the faith, there was a study that was done by this professor at Notre Dame, Christian Smith. He wrote a book about his research called Soul Searching, and he argues that he did a lot of qualitative research on the beliefs, the actual beliefs of young people today. So we did a lot of interviews across all faith traditions. So not just Catholics, but Jews, Muslims, although there are many Muslims in the US, Mormons, Protestants. And he found that their theology was pretty thin. And he sort of defines it as a moralistic therapeutic deism. That they believe in God, but God is somewhat distant from their life and doesn't really get involved. That's the deism part. And he wants us to be good. So we just have to be good, nice people. That's the moralistic part. And if we really need him, if we get in a pinch and we need him in some way, then we can call upon him and he'll come and help us. So that's the therapeutic part. But the sort of intimate covenantal relationship that we see in the scriptures and this union with Christ and the sacramental life and the transformation of us and of the world is just not something that is in their worldview. In general, okay, overall. He goes into a lot of detail of the different percentages of all these things. But I teach freshmen and I teach juniors, and obviously I spend a lot of time with students. But if we asked our own students some of these questions, this would not be far distant from what they believe, I think. So these are some of the things that we're seeing. But there are also opportunities. I just want to mention a few. This is not all the opportunities, but I also see a great openness in our students to the Catholic faith. There's been a complete breakdown of the alternative visions for them. Everything has become so fragmented, postmodern. So in the modern age, you had these very robust systems of thought that people believed in, like communism. And you could sort of order your entire life around this system, and it was very, it gave you something to do. But those systems now are all broken down. And so our students, they're just unconvinced by these things. This semester, I talked to my juniors about different atheistic worldviews, and I was expecting some of them to sort of be attracted to at least some of them, but they were not at all. Materialism, scientific materialism, they just saw it as kind of silly, that there was no foundation for it. Existentialism, weren't interested. So I think the postmodern situation has many problems with it, but there are some advantages. And one is, there is no real robust alternative to Christianity in the world today. There are these many projects that people jump onto, but there's no vision of the whole that is being offered to young people. So that provides us with a great opportunity. Also, paradoxically, the moral breakdown that we've seen in our society over the last 50 years, I could show a lot of stats on that, but moves the students to desire moral norms and a moral compass. You don't see a lot of pushback from students these days on the moral teachings of the church. Even the sexual teachings of the church would have been so controversial because they've kind of experienced what life is without those. They've sort of seen it not just in their own lives, but probably in the lives of their friends as well. And they've seen that it's not a good thing. So by experience, they've sort of come to see that, no, we need to be, we need moral norms. We need discipline. We need someone to teach us. And then finally, there's a great desire for transcendence, for something beyond. It just keeps springing up in the human soul. Pope Benedict spoke a lot about this. You just can't do away with it. In about 50 years ago, there were a lot of social scientists and philosophers who thought that religion would just die out. There was some infantile stage in human development, but now that we've moved on and we've become rational, it was just going to leave. But what we've seen over the last 50 years is that's just not happened. And in fact, in many places where it seemed to have died out, it's having a rebirth. In certain places in Europe, for example. So people don't believe that anymore, at least not, some people do, but a lot of researchers see that religion is going to be a perennial force in the world because there is a human desire for transcendence that you just cannot extinguish no matter what. And we see that in the students. So that's a great sign of hope. More concretely, here at SLUH, we have a very dedicated staff and faculty who work very hard and love the students and really want to be about the mission. We have a huge support from our alumni, from you, and from many others, which is an incredible resource that so many other schools don't have. that makes our position in response to these challenges very strong. And then technology, although it has many problems with it, it also provides a lot of new potential that we can tap into, and it gives us an access to resources that we just never had before. So it's to try to harness those opportunities. All right, we're getting close to the end. Sorry. So what is the future? At least as I see it, this is Joseph Hill's idea, but it's, I think, solidly based on the tradition. Tradition never graduates. We need to have a robust and dynamic faith formation so that Christ is better loved and served. That has to be foundational. If we lose that, I think we lose what it means to be a Jesuit school. And I think many Jesuit schools are really, really fighting this point right now. How do we do that well? And we're taking a look at that very seriously. Obviously, we need a rigorous academic curriculum, but that curriculum must focus on depth of understanding. And it has to have a balance between science and the arts. I don't think that we can go wholesale into STEM and become like a STEM school. I just don't think that's part of our essence, our identity. I have no problem with us moving in that direction partially, but we can't go all the way. There are some schools that are just, it's just a STEM school. I mean, they're not hardly doing any of the arts. But that is not, I think, part of the Jesuit tradition. We have to have a balance of both. And then I think we have to have a real focus on student performance and transfer of understanding. That the Jesuits were not so much interested in high test scores. And if the early Jesuits were here today, they would not have talked about ACT scores and that, you know, SLUH students are in the top 5% of all the nation. That would not have interested them that much. What they would have shown is what the students can do. They would have brought students up to the front and got them to perform something, to give an oration, to write their own poetry, or to deliver a debate discussion, to show their understanding, their depth. I think that's what we need to stay focused on, because that's what transfers to the world. And no matter what discipline or what career you go into, having the skills and the understanding together integrated is what makes you different and I think successful no matter what you do. And then finally, well, two last things, obvious. There has to be an intellectual integration. It's not just that the faith formation is over here and kids go on retreats and they have theology class and then we just pound them with the academics. There has to be an integration of these two things. That's what we saw in the early Jesuit schools, the eruditio et pietas, that the Catholic faith is the integrating principle of the knowledge and the living and the action of the students. And then we have to form the students in virtue. SLUH has to be a school of virtue. So what are some of the things that we're doing to get to this vision? This is not everything that we're doing, but I'm just going to focus on two initiatives that we've been working on coming out of the strategic plan. So I don't know the last time you looked at the strategic plan, but the main goal, the central goal statement of the strategic plan is this. By 2018, St. Louis University High School will model academic achievement and faith formation for the nation and the world. So right in line with what I've just been saying about what is the future. So I just want to focus on two things that we're working on right now in the school, the curriculum development and the faith formation that is trying to realize this vision. Joe? So very quickly, we are in the midst of a curriculum development plan. If you talk to any teachers, you ask them about this, and you'll get either cringes or excitement. So it's been a process, a challenge, but we're trying to improve the SLUH curriculum in order to obviously enhance student achievement. And the goal is to have very high-level performance goals for each subject and for each department, and then also common course assessments so that we can assess whether the students are achieving the goals that we're setting for them. So we want to teach to the big ideas. What are the principles and causes of every discipline? Physics, chemistry, biology, but also what are the principles of mathematics? What are the principles of literature, of good writing, of storytelling? What are the fundamental principles and big ideas of the Catholic faith? We want them to understand these things so they can apply them in any context. Any story can be analyzed on the basis of the ideas that they learn here. So we're trying to privilege depth of understanding and skill development to content coverage and knowledge, and just, factual knowledge. And so the plan is for this year, we're developing the goals. We've been working on them, both at the department levels and then also at the course levels. And then next year, we're going to work on the common course assessments and see how we can start tracking student achievement based upon the goals. And then the year after that, we're going to try to use the data that we've gained from the assessments to improve teaching in the classroom and targeting the best methods possible in order to achieve the goals that we set. And then for the faith formation, this is something that I'm very involved in. The goal over the next 3 years is to develop an integrated 4-year faith formation program that integrates the retreats, the service program, and the theology classes. No school that I know of right now has that kind of integration. So that's what we're hoping for. We're going to see if we can get there. But we hope that we can, so that's the first thing. The second thing is to try to integrate the Catholic faith and the Catholic understanding of the world and the human person into all the disciplines. So one of the goals of the curriculum development is to have each department define one goal that ties their discipline into a Catholic understanding of the human person and the world, so that they can be reinforcing that in their own studies. So what would that look like? So right now, I don't know if you know some students, but there's a physics teacher named Mr. Bod, is what they call him, Bodenstill. He teaches AP Physics, but he has a very famous class at the end of the first semester. And one of the questions of his class, key questions of his class is, statements is, the universe is ordered. And the whole class is trying to figure out what that order is. The last class of the semester, he asked the question, why? And then he explains that there must be some sort of creator, designer, that established the order, that wrote the order into the universe. So that kind of thing, that kind of integration, them hearing that from a physics teacher after a whole semester of physics is very, very powerful for the students, because it allows them in their own minds to see the connections between what we've been talking about in theology, what they read in the Bible, and what they're seeing in science. So that's what we're hoping for all the disciplines. And so that's hopefully how we're going to get to this beautiful vision of giving glory to God in all things. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Father Hill. Lost my notes here. Okay. Next, Jeff Brombach, class of 98, right, is going to come up and talk to us about the bicentennial celebrations that are going to be, that are already underway, but developing for the spring. Yep. Are you going to? Yeah, outside. Okay. All right. Merry Christmas, everybody. This is always a fun day to get together because I met Greg Pratt's kid, and it's interesting to see everybody's family, and Greg and I were classmates. We have kids the same age, and so I like this day a lot, seeing the Burnses around with their families. And so Merry Christmas to everybody. Obviously, we're having a huge bicentennial event, and the school has called on us as the alumni board to help out. There's a lot of ways we can do it. Ashbaugh, so I know the Mothers Club is really taxed at that time, and the students are taxed at that time. So if there is a way that we can help out, it's volunteering on the day of. Obviously, there's a mass, there's a party, and there are fireworks. But before the mass, there's setup. During the mass, there's stuff that goes on. There's transportation. There are all sorts of logistical needs. And then after the celebration, there's cleanup, which is obviously a huge logistical need. So one of the thoughts that Ben and I and a couple other people were throwing around were, if classes could get together, and us as ambassadors of our class, if we could get together and get some of our classmates to help out. I don't think it needs to be the entire SLUH network that's doing this, but if we have a great core of volunteers, somebody on logistics, somebody on cleanup, somebody on music, somebody on something else,
this can really work, and we can be a great resource for SLUH. So Ben is going to send an email around to our group and to everybody here that couldn't make it. And if you would like to sign up, there's a great group of people that are already planning this, and it's in the works. So you don't have to come with a billion ideas. You just have to volunteer your time. So treat it like a service day almost. And it doesn't mean you can't have a great time at the event either, because I think all of us, whatever we're doing, we're going to have a great time. You know, maybe you only need to do something at the end, maybe at the beginning. And then Ben also promised a pool hall night for our families. He just learned that. For anybody that volunteers, there's going to be a pool hall night so we can bring our families and play pool with them. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Ben has my contact information. Feel free to reach out to Ben. Short and sweet. They need help, and we can help. So just want to introduce Melissa Jones, who's the Vice President of Advancement. I believe Dave is traveling, and Melissa is going to give us a school update.
Good morning. As Jeff said, I'm Melissa Jones. I'm the Vice President of Institutional Advancement here at the U High. I am in my 6th year. And welcome to the families. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for hanging in there. I know it's been quite a morning. My kids are 26, 17, and 14. So thank you for bringing your kids and hanging in there with us. It does get easier a little bit. Thank you too to Father Hill for speaking today. Father Hill, that was wonderful. We really appreciate it. Steve Hutchison just told me it really resonated with him, and so we're glad that you were here. As Jeff mentioned, Dave Laughlin is traveling, so he is unable to be with us today, but he did ask me to send you his greetings. So I'm going to give you just a brief update. I'm going to try to keep it within 5 to 10 minutes, and see how we do here. So just a few things. 7 seniors, and I love this. This is a great, thank you, Father Hill, but we did have 7 seniors receive a top score of 36 on the ACT exam this year. Our main score, once again, was a 30, putting our average students in the top 5% of the nation. Over 1/3 of our seniors scored a 33 or higher, which put them in the nation's elite 2%. So one senior, Kurt Schumacher, earned a top score of 36, joining 2 of his brothers, who also scored a 36 on the ACT when they were here at SLUH. Stephen, who's class of 2008, and Frank, class of 2010. 13 seniors have been named National Merit semifinalists. We also have 13 commended National Merit Scholars. As you know, it's just a few days after our first alumni board meeting of the year, but the last one that we were together, that Hurricane Harvey hit the Houston area on August 25th. Irma made landfall on September 10th in Florida, and Hurricane Maria devastated Puerto Rico the early hours of September 20th. You know, and in response to the hurricanes hitting our brother Jesuit schools, SLUH students raised over $20,000 for these families, and we will dedicate our Mission Week next semester to Puerto Rico and send students there for Senior Project. On October 20th, our community headed out into the city to complete a bicentennial day of service. We had 500 freshmen and sophomores and faculty and staff who worked in Forest Park, another 500 juniors and seniors and faculty, at 20 other project sites throughout the region. So we closed the day with a group lunch and bicentennial photo in the shape of 200. Thanks to Craig Hannock for putting that together. The Clavius project continues to expand, serving 32 middle schools this year and pairing over 30 of our junior bills with inner city students to provide mentorship for both robotics and math and science work. So I would invite you to mark your calendar for the 3rd annual Clavius Jamboree on Saturday, January 20th in the Field House. Just last month, it's hard to believe last month was November, but in November, Senior Delton Utsi gave a keynote address before 2,000 attendees of the Nation Family Teach-In for Social Justice in Washington, D.C. He received a standing ovation for his framing of a way forward for difficult dialogue using empathy and understanding. Now, his talk reminded me of the scripture verse from Proverbs, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. You know, sharpening can be painful, but it is necessary. And we teach civil discourse here at the U High, and which is, you know, listening and listening for understanding of one another. And I had lunch recently with SLUH alumnus Ryan Hopkins, class of 2016. Some of you may remember Ryan addressed this group about 1.5 years ago as gave the May senior reflection. And he was in town for Thanksgiving from Loyola Marymount University, where he's in film school. And we talked about how important the teaching of civil discourse is today, how we wish more people understood it, practiced it, how important it was to him and his peers, how it taught them, and as he said in his words, helped people to keep from just going back to their camp and doubling down in their own belief system and not listening and being open to what others are saying and doing it in a respectful way. So it was a good visit with him, and you'll be glad to know he's doing very well. And our community continues to do the hard work of loving and sharpening one another for God's glory. And to that end, the week of Thanksgiving, we held 5 student retreats. The Philia Retreat, which is an overnight retreat for students to reflect on issues of diversity from a spiritual perspective. A service retreat, the required freshman retreat, Kairos, and 2 junior retreats. Now our winter sports season is underway. The fall sports finished well. We had soccer, swimming and diving, football and cross country all had playoff runs. The Missouri State High School Activities Association named Joe Porter and Lindsay Arrett coaches of the year. And theology teacher Charlie Martell recorded his astounding 500th win as the head coach of varsity soccer. Now, Father Hill mentioned it, and this year we've begun a comprehensive curriculum review as part of our strategic plan, which is the result of Imagining 18. Now, I understand from Father Gibbons that this review will be the first time in nearly 3 decades that we've taken on such a comprehensive, cogent assessment and alignment of our curriculum. So, as in his words, while we do great things now, we will be able to assure our path forward deep into the 21st century. Adapting a new classroom management platform to support better communications and projects and coursework using Canvas, which is a well-regarded program. Some of the other school initiatives as part of our strategic plan include a review and development of student leadership programs, assessment of technology use in the building, and the expansion of student support services programs. Now, the 3-pronged student support services programs that is being developed is one of the most comprehensive and is becoming one of the most comprehensive programs in the region. Now, as I mentioned, these initiatives are part of our strategic plan, which was developed from Imagining 18. You saw the words in Father Hill's presentation about the Go Forth strategic plan, and really the Go Forth is the campaign, if you will, the capital campaign to, for us to be able to fund those initiatives that came out of Imagining 18, our strategic plan. So we're still in the quiet phase of our capital campaign known as Go Forth, and you haven't heard a lot about it publicly simply for that reason, that we're still talking to people individually, one-on-one, and asking them to be a part of it. We will go public with the campaign at some point, and I would be happy to discuss with you individually where we're at in terms of our goal for the campaign and the timing of this campaign and what that looks like. And finally, to close, I'm sure you've heard, we've hired our new president to begin July 1st. So Alan Carruthers is principal of the Boys Division of Regis Jesuit in Denver. He has 22 years of experience in Jesuit education at 3 high schools. Alan has been a teacher at Rockhurst Jesuit High School in Kansas City, Missouri, a teacher and vice principal of students at St. Paul's Jesuit High in Winnipeg, Manitoba. and since 2012, principal at Regis Jesuit. So he has a master's in Jesuit administration from St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia, a Bachelor of Education from the University of Manitoba, and a Bachelor of Arts with a double major in Political Studies and History, also from the University of Manitoba. He's a Canadian, So he's a good man. I think he'll do well. I was able to talk with him over the summer, and then I was able to interview him as part of the process in bringing him here. But I can tell you personally, I will greatly, as I know you all will, greatly miss Dave Laughlin. He will be the longest serving president of the school, at least since we've been in Mrs. Backer's building, since 1923. Don't know about all 200 years, but he's the longest serving president and the first lay president, though, in its 200-year history. So I will greatly miss him. I will greatly miss working for him. But I think Alan will do well. I think that he will be a very good leader for us at the U High. So I'm eager to introduce you to him. We are putting a transition team in place. We have a plan in place, and we've already been working through some very key transition pieces just to be able to make sure this is as smooth as possible and to support our strategic vision into the third century of this school. It's a critical time, a great time to be here. I'd entertain a few questions if anybody has any. If not, Tony, I don't know if you want to come back up and say a few words, but thank you very much.
Okay, we're in the home stretch. Thankfully, we're almost ready for lunch, which will be, no, there's no lunch. Okay, upcoming events. Christmas Eve Mass, which is not midnight anymore, but at 10 o'clock, which I've missed the past couple of years, but I'm going to try to do that with my family this year. For those of you like me who graduated in a year that ends in an 8 or a 3, you have a reunion coming up next year. There's a reunion planning dinner on January 18th. So that'll be an exciting year for those of us. Father Hill, I was going to talk about Eloquentia Perfecta, but there's a play coming up that you could just go see if you want to show what the school's doing in that respect. And that is The West Side Story, which is a great play, of course. That's February 15th and 18th. And then our next meeting is the evening of February 27th. District basketball tournament at the end of February and beginning of March. 2 big events. Obviously, we've heard about some of these already. Cashba, which is Saturday, April 7th. Obviously, a big year, 200, the Bicentennial Ball. And then 2 weeks later, that Jeff talked about, the Bicentennial celebration here at the school. Those are obviously very big events that you'll hear a lot more about. And then our spring meeting is the appreciation dinner is May 22nd, near the end of the school year, where we will have another student speaker. Those of you who are lawyers, we have a CLE seminar at SLUH coming up. They had this last year. They're going to have it again this year on May 30th. And that, if you're a lawyer, you know that's near the end of the reporting period for CLE requirements. So it's a good way to get all your hours in one spot and support SLUH High. And then, of course, Father Hagen's annual Alumni Cup golf tournament, Friday, June 22nd in the afternoon. I think that's it. Right, Joe? Yep, that's it. So thank you again. It's a great season of Thanksgiving. Thanks to all of you for coming. I'm thankful every day that I went to school here. I know you all are too. And thanks for everything you do for the school. Thanks.